If you are like most of us living in the Western world today, then you probably don't have any real friends. And I want to argue that's okay. Let's investigate this matter together. First, ask yourself the question, how many of your friendships are contingent upon shared pleasure or mutual interest? Such that if you no longer were interested in this activity or event or that interest, the friendship would soon dissolve. How many friends fall into the category of friendships of pleasure, as Aristotle termed them? Look right now and see. Okay, set those off to the side. We don't need to look at those anymore because they're not real friends. Now consider the question, how many of your friends are useful or advantageous to you and you to them? Such that if you were no longer to work in this industry or in this profession, you would cease to be their friends and they would cease to be yours. How many of these fall into that category? Into the category of what Aristotle termed friendships of utility? Perhaps quite a few. Set those off to the side. Now let's look at two thought experiments to discover whether you have any friendships of virtue or close friends or real friends. Here's the first thought experiment. Let's go through it together. Let's suppose you find that you're quite sick. Not seriously ill, but you are so sick that you need to throw up in the toilet. So you go to the bathroom to throw up in the toilet. Let's imagine quite magically that a friend could come to your aid, and that friend would hold back your hair during this time of great vulnerability. Do you have any friends who would do that for you? Friends who would hold back your hair while you're in this incredibly fragile state, while you're wrenching your guts out, while the smell and the possibility of throwing up in turn is presenting itself to your friend. How many friends would actually do that for you? Do you have any? Most of us don't. So a second thought experiment. Let's suppose, God forbid, that tomorrow you were to die. Let's suppose you were living in a faraway land, well away from where family and what we might here term provisionally friends live. How many friends, set aside family members, would be willing to hop on a plane and to make multiple connections in order to go to your funeral? In other words, how many would take planes, trains, and automobiles, so to speak, in order to come to your funeral? Let's be honest, how many? All three experiments here, one having to do with Aristotle, that clears the ground for looking at real friendships. The other two that are trying to focus in on an intuition about what would be involved in a close or real friendship are meant to bring us to the following insight. It just doesn't seem as if we have many, if any, close friendships today. This is in keeping with recent polls that have indicated that, yes, many people have said as much. I want to offer a twist, though, since on this channel we're interested in the spiritual or existential significance of this ordinary topic. What might that significance be? When you start looking more closely at the strongly held belief and feeling, I'm existentially alone. There's nobody here for me. What might you discover? There are, in fact, two discoveries. Suppose you focus your attention very keenly on the sense of I, in I am alone. When you look very, very closely at the sense of I, very closely, very meditatively or contemplatively, what you discover is that the true sense of I is awareness, and therefore not a limited or finite being subject to suffering. You find that you are not only aware, but more potently so, awareness itself. Now go back to that statement, I am deeply or existentially alone or friendless. If you look very closely at the loneliness part, if you go into the feeling of loneliness, very, very potently, what do you discover? Well, the first thing you'll find is that that feeling will subside. It will come and it will go. Now the question is, what is it that remains? What is that, in other words, out of which the feeling of loneliness is appearing? And what is that into which loneliness subsides? That is peace, non-contingent, non-circumstantial, non-volitional, beyond desire, beyond all situations. So the first discovery is that I'm not this limited being who feels that he's suffering in this way. And the second discovery is that the very nature of the feeling of loneliness, or any other feeling for that matter, is peace. And so the original statement, which is, you are probably friendless, and that's okay, turns out through a deeper investigation to mean the following. You, awareness, are peace itself. All that remains is to know this, not just intellectually, but also experientially.